Hello, and welcome to the Simply Business Interview Podcast, a podcast created by business owners for business owners. I am your host, John Jennings. And I believe that most business owners are working way too hard for much too little. And one of our issues is that we overcomplexify things. I believe the answers are almost always within us or within our reach. I like to say that I'm a simple man with simple ideas. So welcome to Simply Business. All right, today we are joined by Kevin Baer, who is the owner and founder of Utilities Dynamics. Looking forward to hearing his story of successful nearly 2 decades in business. And he's an entrepreneur. He's got his hands in a lot of things, but we're gonna learn more about his journey. So Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me on, John. Name is Kevin Baer. I live here in Paducah, Kentucky, kind of in the corner, close to Missouri and Illinois. I grew up in St. Louis, went to University of Missouri-Rolla and got an electrical engineering degree and got a job out of college, worked for uranium gaseous diffusion plant here in Paducah that was operated by Lockheed Martin, and did that from 1991 till about 1997. And then kind of had the idea to go out on my own and kind of risk it all and go to the SBA and get loans and start a business. Had a business partner at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we decided to go into the energy management, energy services field. So back then, the energy efficient lighting retrofit business was kind of booming, and there was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of utility rebates going on. And so we launched a business that provides turnkey solutions for customers with existing facilities. So we do a lot of retrofit work. We go in and we show customers how they can save money on their utility bills by doing energy improvements, whether it be,
Mm-hmm.
water conservation, HVAC, uh, controls, and lighting retrofits. And
Mm-hmm.
so we focused, our core business on lighting retrofits, since 1997, but also added other ancillary services, related to, HVAC systems, water, building envelope. Uh, we have our own crews, so we have installers on staff, hourly electricians, also have project managers who manage these projects. And, we do work for just a variety of different customers,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be the large energy service companies, like your Train, Johnson Controls, Siemens, Honeywell. We'll do work for them in K through 12 schools, higher ed, government, city, county buildings, maybe federal hospitals. And we also do projects for direct customers, banks, maybe national multi-site accounts like retail stores across the country. So, um, kind of been doing the same type of business since 1997, but it evolves based on technology and everything's LED lighting now, and there's some other different types of technology that we implement. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, glad to be on the show. And that's I'm an electrical engineer, is my background. So me and my wife actually own the company now. We are a woman-owned business. Like I said, I had another partner for 20 years, a 50-50 partner, and that always has its challenges
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
within any business. And so
sure.
for the last I guess 8 years, it's been basically me, and my wife helps as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. I did bad math there earlier. I said 2 decades. You're actually almost 3 decades.
oh, I
Uh,
know
yeah. Yeah.
time adds up. I mean, when
I'm
you
usually pretty good at math, but that one slipped on me for some reason. It's a long time. So I'm always fascinated with people who take, you mentioned, taking that risk, swallowing, swallowing hard, take a deep breath and go, yeah, let's let's try this. And you came up with an idea of basically lighting. I mean, I was in the utility industry at the time, so I remember that big push to go to energy efficient lighting and things like that. But what made you think, gosh, we can build a business on it, and for I may be around 30 years from now still doing still doing it. Um, what was the impetus behind that?
Well, like I said, back in the 90s, there was a big push to for let's just take lighting for instance, to convert to uh we went from T12 to T8 lighting and the old magnetic ballast to electronic ballast. So that was the big push at the time, and it had a lot of energy savings, and the utility companies, they offered, substantial rebates to customers to, cut their utility bills, which
Hmm.
seems kind of antithetical to their business model. They're incentivizing customers to use less energy.
Right.
But the reason they do that is so they have more capacity to take on new customers.
Hmm.
And so the market was pretty hot back then, and it seemed like a service that almost sold itself. You go
Yeah.
into a customer, you show them, if you spend $100,000 on this project, it's going to save you $40,000 a year in, um, off your utility bill. And so the ROI and the payback seems like a no-brainer, and it kind of is, but it's
Hmm.
still hard to convince some customers to spend money, especially if they don't have capital available, even though the project probably has a better return on investment than most capital investments that they have.
Hmm.
So it just seemed like, it should be an easy sell, and it is for some customers, and for others, it's not.
Yeah.
And, it took a while for us to get some traction, but then, it slowly, some word of mouth kind of helped us. One customer led us to another customer. And, over time, you get your name out there, and there is a lot of opportunity. We don't do any new construction, so it's all existing facilities. So there's a whole big footprint of square footage of facility space that's not always been touched.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, it sounds similar to the ROI message that solar people are putting out there today. Because
Mhm.
utilities, again, given they get tax benefits in this case, not utility kickbacks, but they get tax benefits. And I've got a friend in that business, and yeah, it's the same thing. Sometimes it sells itself, and sometimes it's a harder sell. But it
Yeah,
sounds
and,
kind
one,
of similar story.
and what we found is you have to really educate and convince your customer that they're going to get the savings. And so one of the things we've done from day one is we're very detailed in how we analyze the actual energy savings, through measurement and verification. You have to show your
Hmm.
customer that, you're going to see these savings. Now, they don't always see that reduction on every single monthly utility bill because they may have their HVAC systems may be working harder than they were the year before, but the cost reduction is always there on lighting. So it's pretty easy
Right.
to verify and measure what those savings are for the customer. So,
Mhm. Interesting. Yeah, and I'm sure being uh, knowing many electrical engineers, having some in my family, I'm sure the detail was is overwhelming that you guys go through.
yeah, it is. And that's kind of my area of expertise is reports and data
Yeah.
analysis and calculations. And, you can show all that on paper, but then you got to go out in the field and actually, measure what you're doing
Hmm.
through data logging and, um, spot wattage measurements. So, yeah, we've taken
Yeah.
a lot of pride in, making sure that the data is supported by what we do.
Yeah. So think back, I know how hard it is for me to think back 30 years, but think back in those early days and what was kind of the biggest surprise to you when you took that plunge? You had a partner, which I think is is one of those things that helps in some ways and hurts in others. But I think generally it's a good thing to have a partner
Yeah.
when you take that at least that first leap into business. But what was what was that biggest surprise that you weren't expecting when you made that leap?
Yeah. So did it back in 97 and I had just we just had our third kid. So got three kids under the age of 8 and then decided to make this plunge. What
Mm,
perfect timing.
yeah,
Leaving a pretty stable salary position and starting your own business. So um getting funding to help us through the SBA was, we that wasn't so difficult, but I'd say the biggest surprise is just, how hard it is to kind of get started and gain traction. We thought we
mm,
had a pretty decent pipeline of opportunities, and it's easy to do a business plan and project what you're going to look like for the next 5 years. But it's sometimes a lot of that stuff is just a guess.
yeah,
And that's what we realized, like, oh, wow, our hit rate on what we thought is not always working here. And
yeah,
so it took us longer to sell projects too. That's the thing.
yeah,
That surprised me because we're offering something that customers don't always think they need. We're
yeah.
not going in and fixing necessarily something that's broken down, like
Hmm.
all their lighting went out. Well, that's got to be fixed. Your HVAC system is out. Well, you're going to get that fixed because you need heating
Right.
and cooling. But if
Yeah.
we're going in and just saying, well, let's just retrofit your building to make it more efficient, that's not always on a customer's radar. So it seemed like what we were presenting is like, well, this is an easy solution. You should do this because it has a good ROI. Well, it's not always a priority for customers. And so the biggest surprise was how long it really takes
Yeah.
on the sales cycle for what we're doing.
Yeah. When I talk to people who are starting a business and they have a plan and they're saying, yeah, I'm going to be profitable in the first 6 months or whatever it is, I will usually I'll ask them some version of, okay, let's imagine your sales are half, half what you think it's going to be. Are you still going to go forward with this? Look
Hmm.
at the analysis with it at half. Look at it at one fourth. If the sales are one fourth what you think, it takes 4 times as long to close a deal than you think. What we does the business still make sense? And maybe maybe they go, well, but that's a risk you might still want to take. But I think it's always better to go in with your eyes wide open than kind of with some pipe dream that then 6 months later you're going back to the bank or you're dipping into your savings or whatever.
Well,
Uh,
I think that's a good point. If you're going to work with the SBA to try to get startup funding, you have to present these 5-year business plans.
yeah.
And I think internally, we know that that's not it's just projections. It'd be great if that all came true, but I think internally you always know, like, our expected outcomes are probably not exactly what we presented, but it could be this.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think internally we knew that our numbers were more conservative, but it's still the length of time to actually get closure to contracts and start making money. It took longer than what I anticipated.
Hmm. So you talked about having a family. I I had dreams of starting a business when my kids were around that age, which would have been around that same time period. And I'm like, no, can't, can't, can't do it right now. I didn't have that gumption, if you will. I waited till after my kids were um, actually, yeah, even married. So
Hmm.
they were well outside my responsibility at that point. I'm like, okay, we can roll the dice now. Um, how did you maintain? And I think balance is a terrible word because I don't think we can really have work life balance. But uh, what was your how did you maintain your sanity? I guess during those years of being a full time dad and full time entrepreneur.
Well, I think you just have to have your eyes set on what your goals are. And once I decided to leave the salaried position that I was at, um, it was one of those things like now's the timing. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it now. And I know it's a risk, but I also knew the risk was like, if this doesn't work out, I mean, I can always go get another job, a
Yeah.
similar type of job. So, maintaining the balance of the family life, it was actually a little easier than I thought. Now, I worked a lot in the evenings. I would do a lot of my, you know, computer paperwork, all the reporting information I needed to do. I would do a lot of that, kind of in the evenings. So,
Mhm.
and I traveled some, but I always, tried to make a priority to make it to kids' games, as much as I could. Was still very involved, as a parent. And, I don't know, when you're younger, it just seems like you can get by with a lot
Yeah.
less sleep. And, it's when you're borrowing money to get a business going, like I got to make this work.
Yeah.
And so the actual balance of the family life, I didn't find that as much of a challenge as, some people might think it is. When you have I had like a 7 to 4 job before. And so I had to be there, every single day. Well, when you go into business for yourself, you can be somewhat flexible.
Yeah.
And there might be deadlines you have to meet, but I might do it on the weekends too sometimes.
Right.
Do family stuff and then be able to work on the weekends where I couldn't do that with my previous job. I really didn't take my work home with me
Hmm.
before. And then in business for yourself, your work is always home. It's always in your head.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of camps out there and is there with you all the time. And I agree with that. You know, honestly, when I look back, I go, wow. A lot of ways, I wish I had have done something when I was younger. The upside is what you said. When you're younger and you take that risk, it's pretty easy to go back and get a job. If you're in your 50s, it's sometimes a little harder if you uh, don't don't succeed. When you do that. But I
Well,
love
and and
the
and
oh, go ahead.
also back then, it's well, I had my first kid pretty young. I wasn't even out of college. Wasn't necessarily planned, but started life early as a dad. And so,
Yeah.
um, when you get thrown in the mix of that, it can be tough to make ends meet, when uh, you have a lot of expenses with kids. And I knew where I was at before, the ladder's only so high, sometimes it's hard, especially within a big corporation. I kind of saw the ceiling of like what could happen here, and I'm thinking, well, if I really want to better myself, I need to make this plunge. And so um, I felt like it was totally worth the risk, especially when I was young. I didn't feel like I had a whole lot to lose at the time.
Mhm.
Maybe a little bit of money borrowed from the SBA, but you always work on paying that back if you had to.
Yeah.
So, taking a risk later in life where I was working, had a good stable job, I think I'd have a little different mindset.
Yeah. I love the failure is not an option. That was kind of my when I went into this
Hmm.
7 years ago. I'm like, it's going for broke here.
Yeah.
Failure. And what's that? That's failure is not an option. It's from one of the movie. I don't know, Apollo, maybe the Apollo movie. I can't remember, but I love that phrase, and I think that's a mantra that um, would do more people well, in startups because I think we've a lot of folks give up too soon.
Well, that's a great point. You have a lot of setbacks when you have your own business, and you have these, I call them like little mini failures where you really think you've got a contract and something happens, and
Yeah.
you had counted on that, and it's really disappointing. But you regroup, and like you said, you can't the big picture can't fail, and so you gotta plunge on, and then over time you realize I'm not going to expect everything that
Mhm.
seems like it's going to work out because it
Yeah.
doesn't all the time.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. And that's also part of the learning and growth we have as business owners for sure. Uh,
Absolutely.
so how do you, I mean, you're not replacing the same LED or go into the same LED lights you did 30 years ago. Your technology in that area and everything you do has changed. So how do you all stay relevant? How do you stay current with what's going on? What does that look like?
We work with electrical distributors and suppliers. We work with lighting rep companies, like these lighting rep companies. Um, they don't really sell to end users, but they'll sell through distribution, and they have a lot of manufacturers that they represent, and so we communicate with them regularly. We do training on, new products that are coming out. Their manufacturer reps come see us. They show us all their new products. We'll do seminars, continuing education. We might go to Light Fair. Light Fair is it's a big trade show that's usually it's in like Las Vegas or New York City, where you see lots of the new technologies coming out. And so you realize that at some point the things you were doing, okay, that's just become antiquated, and it sometimes kind of happens overnight. It
Yeah.
really does. When compact fluorescents got replaced with LEDs, and your outside, your HID metal halide type lighting, it started getting replaced with LEDs. So not all at the same time. So when the
Mhm.
LED lighting market kind of came into effect, it trickled in. It didn't encompass everything that a customer had. It may have been just their indoor lighting, and we couldn't do anything with the outdoor. So as the new technology comes on, sometimes you have to wait until the cost comes down. Cost is extremely high early, and then
Right.
those prices drop, and then the performance and the efficiency comes up. And then we look at the numbers, we're like, okay, now this makes sense. The ROI, the return on investment is there, and now let's
Mhm.
start pushing this. And so it's pretty easy to stay abreast of what technology is doing. Um, and it's easy to kind of run the numbers to decide, do we want to pursue this with our customers or not yet? So that piece is not that difficult.
Yeah. So that's how you stay successful. You mentioned earlier about having like small failures kind of help build you along the way. But what's been the boy, if you go back over the past, what's been that one moment or one struggle you went, wow, that was a painful lesson.
Oh, so a painful lesson is, managing your growth. So
Mhm.
we had a time period back in the I don't know, let's say 2005, 2007, something like that, where our sales and our business development kind of grew. And we were able to get some pretty large projects. And some of these were like multi-site national account type projects.
Mhm.
We did some work for limited brands back when they had Victoria's Secret and Bath and Body and
Yeah.
Limited, Express. We did, work for Saks Fifth Avenue, Dollar General, and, going across the country doing these projects. And so we expanded and hired, I had engineers, project managers in various cities across the country. And we grew our internal staff that we use to actually perform the work on these projects, electricians. And so we kind of grew and grew. And then all of a sudden, our sales didn't keep up with the growth of employees we had. And you
Yeah.
turn around and you're like, our cash is kind of dwindling.
Mhm.
Um, don't want to don't want to get rid of people. Like I had a lot of great employees that worked for me, the ones that were on staff, I mean, I just, loved them. They were great workers. And you don't want to lay them off. You feel kind of
Yeah.
a responsibility to give them work, because that's why I hired them. They're not responsible
Right.
for finding their own work. And so what happened was you have a lot of staff, you don't have the projects, your pipeline is not looking as good as it did, and you turn around and you start realizing our cash flow is going the reverse direction. And
Mhm.
so kind of waited too long to scale back and, get a little bit leaner with fewer employees because I felt that this responsibility to keep them on. But what I found was when I went to these employees and said, "Look, we're scaling back. Like I'm sorry, I can't keep you on." They all knew it. They were all understanding. They're like,
Mhm.
"We get it." So the lesson I learned was, your employee costs can really get you if you don't have them utilized properly on, revenue coming in. And so
Right.
that's a big lesson I learned. Like you better make cutbacks quicker as a small business.
Yeah. Yeah. It is that painful lesson I've seen. I've been through it myself, not as an owner, but as a leader in an organization where we had the same thing. We built because things were going a direction and you expect it, and then some unexpected force, sends it a different direction. And it's never a fun conversation.
No, never.
So let's talk more positive. What's on the horizon for you?
Um, on the horizon is looking at different vertical markets, looking at other types of customers that we haven't in the past, more on the federal side, where what is kind of our push now on the type of customers we want. So, and also adding some different services like solar and, EV charging for
Mm,
electric vehicles.
sure.
We're getting into that realm. You don't know really where that's going to go, but because the EV charging stations kind of keeps changing a little bit. They say they're
Yeah.
rolling out this many, then they scale back, and
A lot of
solar.
government money there, though. Back to the
Yeah,
government money thing.
that's the thing. Taking more advantage of the government money. They've got mandates to improve the efficiency of their facilities too. So
Sure.
it's not like it's wasted money either from the government. Like we're looking at a project, doing a project with NASA, for instance, like right now, and with Doge coming out and looking at wasteful spending. This is not really something that falls on their radar because this is not wasteful spending. When a NASA facility decides to spend however many millions upgrading their facility, they have a guaranteed energy savings payback. So,
Mhm.
um, you know, the like I said, the government sector is really where probably more of our growth is, and then solar in the long term probably is, with the country going to more probably microgrids, meaning,
Mhm.
like small power generation, in all these rural areas. So, we're making sure that we're staying abreast of that technology, and we don't really want to do residential. So, it's more, commercial, industrial,
Right.
applications.
Yeah, I think if I were out in a rural setting, whether it was commercial or residential, I think if I was out in a rural setting where I had plenty of room, I'd go solar all day long and just pay as little as I could to the to the utility.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
hard to make that work here in neighborhoods, and you've got only you can only put on the back of the house because of the zoning and the community guidelines and all that kind of stuff. So it really kind of makes it hard in the city. But I think if I was out in the country, I'd be very tempted to do it.
I will say too, another vertical we're going to make a hard push is industrial customers,
Mm,
uh, because your typical the large energy service companies, like the ones I was talking about, Johnson
yeah.
Controls, Siemens, Honeywell, um, they do guaranteed energy saving performance contracts for the K through 12, the city county governments, where they don't have a lot of money to spend on these projects, and they'll finance them over, 12, 15 years through the energy
Right.
savings. Industrial customers are not going to do that. They are not going to finance projects. They're going to do projects with their own capital, and it has to meet a pretty stringent ROI. And so, going in, and we also have a sister company called Impact Industrial Services, where we specialize in going into industrial facilities and identifying all kinds of energy savings opportunities,
Mhm.
whether it's
Sure.
boilers, chillers, steam generation, compressed air, lighting water. So
Mhm.
that's our next push is with these industrials, because a lot of that market's been untapped. Because if they haven't done it internally, there's not a lot of people that are calling on them
Mhm.
to do a full service, you know, offering like we can.
Yeah. Interesting. So you've got a lot of opportunity ahead. So that's exciting for you.
Hmm.
If someone is curious about learning more about you, maybe they've got one of these industrial places that need to be looked at. How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, we've got a website, utilitiesdynamics.com, and then impactindustrial.net. So, there's a, contact on there that you can reach out to us, and, we'll get the email or phone call. We have, marketing information, but, typically it's a lot of our customers are, word of mouth, referrals,
Mhm.
and, maybe through, like I said, a lot of it is through referrals and people that we knew before.
Sure.
Um, a lot of people in the industry kind of, get on LinkedIn, and people are moving jobs all the time, and you kind of follow them around.
Yeah.
Um, but, you know, like I said, most of our customers are not really reaching out so much because we're providing something that it's not really on their
They're
radar.
not, yeah. It's it's
Especially
interesting.
industrials, they're concerned with making their widgets, and
Sure.
concerned with their processes and making sure they're streamlined and efficient. And
Yeah.
so we like to come in and take some of the heavy lifting off their hands with all their ancillary systems.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like I said, they're not even thinking about those things because they're focused on the line,
Right.
not the lights overhead or
Yep.
whatever. Yeah. Very interesting. So and you're available on LinkedIn. So if folks want to catch you, you're out there as well.
Yes.
I appreciate your time. It's a great story, and I know hopefully it will inspire some other people to take that leap, whatever age, however many kids they have at home,
Yep.
and never look back. So I
Never too
appreciate
early, never too late.
that. All right, Kevin, thank you so much for being on the show.
All right. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you liked it, please share or like it on whatever platform you use. You can find me on social media. On most platforms, I'm John K. Jennings. My first book is also available. Your Baby is Ugly tells you about 10 truths that business owners need to hear, but often won't, and how to overcome them. You can find it on Amazon. Just search for Your Baby is Ugly. And be watching for our next episode, where I'll interview another business owner who will share their stories and insights into what it's like to create a great business.